If you couldn't tell by my persona, I'm a fan of Car Seat Headrest. A big fan. They're one of the best bands I have ever come across. They helped me through breakups, deaths, thoughts of ending it all, and just generally getting through life. I love this band, and I think every album has their highlights. But that has never stopped me from making lists, so here we are, my Car Seat Headrest discography ranking. Car Seat Headrest is an indie rock band from Leesburg, Virginia, led and started by one person, known as Will Toledo. Will recorded most of his first few albums and outtakes albums in his car, different quiet places like his dorm room closet, and other various solitary places. He would mainly self-release on Bandcamp and would later be one of the biggest success stories, from a nobody uploading on a music platform to being signed to a major label. Later on, Will would get the likes of Ethan Ives, Seth Dalby, and the ever-weird Andrew Katz to perform the squad of Car Seat Headrest Matador years from about 2015 to today. With The Scholars being revealed and Get Some Main already out, I think it's better we rank now and avoid recency bias later. The rules are I would only be going through the mainline albums and both outtakes albums. No live albums, bootlegs, or unreleased material. And no EPs aside from How to Leave Town because that's basically an album. Sorry, Starving While Living fans. Which leaves me with 15 albums to go through. At the very, 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 very bottom, we have 2 was released a month after 1, which was the debut album, and is a little higher up than this. So what makes it the absolute worst album in Will's prolific first year? It basically takes all of those elements that I didn't like, such as the bad experimentation, all of the reverse stuff, all of the annoying guitar tones, and just amplifies them to 100%. Songs like Reversible Jacket, Hanging With My Mom in Women's Apparel, and 90 all have these annoying elements to them that make it nearly impossible to actually sit down and listen to. There are pretty touching tracks like Fiction 1, cool garage rock ones like Act Suspicious, and ambient stuff like Then It Will Be Exactly the Same as Earth. But the album is an entire pitfall from 1. And speaking of dips in quality, Teens of Style is the major label debut of Car Seat Headrest, taking songs from Nervous Young Man, Monomania, 3, and My Back Is Killing Me Baby. They reworked these songs a little bit to make them updated to where the band was at the time, still not being full fidelity, but you have a better time listening to what's going on, rather than the lo-fi releases of 2010 to 2014. The reason why I don't like a lot of this record literally has nothing to do with the quality, the songs themselves, or even anything to do with the changes. The songs are just better on their previous albums. There isn't much I have to say, the old ones have more staying power, whereas this is just make an album so we can show off what you have already kind of deal. I'm making some fans mad with this one, but there's reasoning here. I swear. A majority of this has nice sounds. There are songs on here that I happily bop my head to when I listen to them. I really like Even the Who Knows and Feel Like Daniel Johnston, but here's my problem with this album. I only feel like listening to it maybe once every 4 months when I'm bored and want to listen to something different. It's one of those albums that I don't feel like going back to. Nothing is egregious like 2 or bland like Teens of Style. It's just not memorable in the same way other early albums are. 4 feels like it tried to play it safe or lost the steam from 3, and I just don't see it as well as others. There isn't much that really clicks with me. This was the last album or compilation I needed to listen to complete the discography. And I suppose I should reiterate what I said before on 4. I just didn't want to listen to this album for the longest time. It didn't feel necessary for me. Irrelevant given Disjecta Memora was also out there and waiting to be heard. When I did finally listen to it, I was surprised it wasn't as terrible as I thought it would be. Actually, some really great songs that should have made it onto other numbered albums, including I Could Talk With My Eyes Shut, which would have been on My Back Is Killing Me Baby's first version. There are also tracks from the scrap project Stabby Ode, which was Abbey Road stems cut up and pasted together, and Will dubbing over what he heard to make a new song. Leave Together, Samson's Golden Axe, and Nothing are included here. A lot of 5 tracks and stuff from Sunbird Shirts EP that wouldn't see the light of day outside of this compilation. But as I said before, it is fine, and some tracks rival those on later releases, but it definitely just wasn't worth being pestered over to listen to. Will's first album, under the Car Seat Headrest name, is full of potential and experimentation. This, despite it being under 3, is my favorite numbered album. I love the songs that feel like you're hearing someone's personal life go through a parked car. There are so many awesome tracks on here like Up All Night, What Does OUJ Stand For, and the best song in the numbered series, Kid War. I come back to this album on a weekly basis just to hear all the directions Will wanted to go. I don't have it as the best numbered album, and it is pretty much because it's a mess. It's very much a grab bag album where you take what you like and you leave the rest. What 1 was experimenting and throwing around throughout its runtime, I feel like 3 had perfected it. Albums tend to do that if you're early enough. You can pick out where things decided to land. 3 has the right amount of experimentation with a consistent sound palette that people take and say, yeah, that's what I want here. Plenty of songs on here influence others, such as the Beat series combining up to be Beach Life and Death. My favorite in the series is Beach Funeral, which has this bed-rotting sound that I just want to smoke a cigarette to. Portrait of the Artist as a Young Fag is what early Car Seat Headrest is as a song. Just weird, personal lyrics about what he's doing and trying to take it back to the central themes of being awkward, depressed, and lonely during the rise of social media. I really enjoyed plenty of this record except for a couple of songs, such as No Starving, Sun Hot, and admittedly Oh Starving. I think that one was better on the Starving While Living EP. It shouldn't necessarily count because it's not only unreleased, given it was a bonus album given out if you paid more than $5 to the Nervous Young Man copy, it was also merely a bunch of scrap songs and unfinished pieces from 2011 to 2012. So why is it higher than the entire numbered era? Besides the opening and closing of End Piece and Unfinished Paint Star, a majority of these tracks rival some of my least favorites on releases before and after it. Napoleon March into Russia is this gut-wrenching song about Will's tainted relationship with his father, describing his problems in early childhood, hospitalizations, and his queerness not only being tolerated by his own father, who was led to be a hypocrite. Chaos is a cut track from the original Twin Fantasy that wishes he could visit his lover while hiding the face from his parents, though they live nearly halfway across the country. There are also ideas that Will would leave for us to find and then fawn over, like the track Dream Encounter on Smoke Mountain, which has an infectious and slightly annoying tone to it. I put these outtakes albums over a good majority of the rest mentioned because it's like L-pop without having the filler tracks and overall bad ideas. I don't think there's an inherently bad track on the record besides maybe the final track that was mentioned earlier. Madlow, for short, is the band's most recent and most divergent album yet, locking into a completely different sound than previously explored. We explore a different side of writing, getting older and realizing that you have to start thinking about how you want to spend the rest of your life, now that you're approaching your 30s. I think I should remind people that most of the albums that Will made in 2010 were made right before he went into college, and his earliest song that we know of, Room Pacer, was made originally in middle school, but didn't see a performance until last year on a live stream. But back to Madlow, in many cases, this album is the definition of a mixed bag. Tracks on here I would consider the absolute worst on their discography, such as Him Remix and What's With You Lately, but I'm not going to sit here and be headphone dented and say it's the worst thing that the band has put out since signing to Matador. I enjoy a ton of these songs, such as Weightlifters, Martin, There Must Be More Than Blood, and the single Can't Cool Me Down, are all high in my track ranking throughout their discography. There's plenty of songs to love about this record, it's just not really what many people wanted, and what they had built themselves up to be as a full band. In a way, this is the band's John Henry, a switch in sound palette that got panned and felt like a betrayal for the long-time lovers of the band and the ones who only listened to the remake of Twin Fantasy. And speaking of which, what an album to put in the middle of your list! The version that is incredibly well known, loved, being below the original, more roughed version? What an interesting and unique thing! In all seriousness, I have my reasoning for how low this is. I didn't get this version of Twin Fantasy the way I did with the original, and I'll get to my love for the original when I get to it. I think a lot of the changes on this record compared to the original make it lose a lot of the edge that something like Mirror to Mirror, the original 2011 version, had. I don't enjoy a lot of the theatrical and performative side that this one has. It makes most of the lyrics feel disingenuous to my own connection to the concept. And I started with this version as my entry back in 2021. The reflection on the past and moving forward with your life and your future doesn't necessarily click with me, or at least the way it's written down doesn't click with me. It was only really when I was completely down on my luck and heard Mirror to Mirror when it clicked to me, and ruined me for that matter. Everything here is excellently produced, which is why it isn't lower on the list, and it's also fucking Twin Fantasy of all albums, so I'm not going to knock the inferior version of it to the bottom because I don't like it. But I'm more so going to talk about this album when we get to my favorite version of it. But moving on, we have another one that is a bit more on the same level as Face to Face.
It's hard to adjust your eyes after the matinee.
The only double album out of nearly 14 other single albums, Nervous Young Man is Will Toledo exploring a consistent sound palette for over 2 hours, creating cohesion, callbacks, and cascading layers that make it very enjoyable to listen to. So much of Karsten Headrest's constant output has led up to what many consider his magnum opus, a collection of all of his strengths as both a songwriter, musician, storyteller, and vocalist. Many of the most revered songs come off here. Boxing Day, the Gun Song, Crows Rest in Bigger Pieces, all come from here. Boxing Day especially is the #1 song on Rate Your Music among the user base, for its perfection of not wasting your time while still being his longest song to date. I personally am more partial to the first disc of songs rather than the second, with a lot of the favorites being Death of the Movies, the previously mentioned Boxing Day, We Can't Afford Your Depression Anymore, and I even like this version of Big Jacket. But I don't really get this one's full appeal. I find it sound a little bland after a while, and the Gun Song hasn't really clicked with me like others have. Again, it's likely to do something with myself and how I enjoy my car seat, but overall it's amazing, but not one I want to spend 2 hours with all the time.
Biting my clothes to keep from screaming, taking pills to keep.
Originally called 5 and had a couple of other songs on there like Surf Jerk and A Pleasant Sort of Terror, My Back is Killing Me Baby is one of my most listened to albums. I love its very tight packaging and how most of the songs have their own interesting sound. Each one feels like it's someone's favorite and have different reasoning for them. My favorite on this one, Sunburned Shirts, is for its sunny and warm instrumental and somewhat depressing lyrics. Something Soon, Lawns, No Passion are all major highlights on this record. The only time when I didn't fully complete this album is when I got after Lawns and had to leave to do something. I think it's one of the best non-concept albums Will Toledo ever made, and for it being made with ideas that would later on be put on Twin Fantasy, it's one of the perfect introductions to his earlier work. The best album the full band has produced, Teens of Denial is a concept album about learning to find yourself in the adult world, and specifically through college students' perspective. As a former college student and dropout, I will say that this is how I felt as I spent my time there. It's very isolating, weird, and awkward if you aren't a cishet person who ties to people more animalistic in their partying. The lyrics of Destroyed by Hippie Powers represent this sort of transformation ideal of how you want to separate yourself from who you were before. One of their bigger songs is Drunk Drivers Killer Whales, and it's an absolute banger. And the realization that none of it all matters and that you can just find what you love and stick with it on The Ballad of Costa Concordia would have been a beautiful ending if the saga of Frank Sinatra and Joe Goes to School weren't after it. A great way to get into the band, and especially since the newest album is calling back to it in a weird sound palette way.
It is 2014 and I have no idea what is going on in my life.
The act of driving in an isolated highway, not being able to see other life for miles and miles, is a sickening and anxious feeling. Moving from the only home you've ever known in pursuit of your own happiness, and the rest of the How to Leave Town EP is why I appreciate and love it. It's long, it's drawn out, it's absent, which is the highlight in my book. The ending of Dramamine is a 12-minute beast and monster that drags its intro out for 5 minutes, punishing you for being out at this time. But it also deals with love that's long gone and thinking about what could have been and what should have been. The line from Kimochi Warui, my favorite song off of this EP, I'm torn between trying to be a better man and trying to accept the man I am, has broke me down more times than I want to admit. As of writing, this is the 16th best EP on Rate Your Music and deserves to be higher, and above some of the other EPs that have been sticking around for decades at this point.
But the weather is not.
This wasn't the original spot for this album, but it is one I have come to understand and love with my heart. Monomania is Mirror to Mirror's Amnesiac, the sister album. However, a change in sound design is not here. It's a change in lyrical theming. This album is about the fallout of a relationship and its stages of grief. denying that anything happening, hating yourself, wanting to find a bargain, and accepting the feeling that everything that it was is now gone and can never be returned. I love every song on this thing, especially Times to Die and Los Borrachos, which is the end piece from Disjecta Membra. I had gotten out of a very toxic relationship, and when it actually happened, I decided to listen to Monomania. There were multiple spots where I was completely shattered, and it had left me completely empty inside. Afterwards, I called into work and couldn't get out of bed for 2 days. Overall, Monomania's anger and desperation is balanced with its profound lyrics and eye-welling instrumentals.
I haven't looked at the sun for so long, I'd forgotten how much it...
This album is the one that made me understand Car Seat Headrest and its message. It's the album that I have tattooed on my arm. The story of having an image of someone, creating it just so you can love them in your own mind, and then being snapped into reality out of it, and being told that it's not going to work out to this image that you've created. It's this feeling of being there, feeling this image, and slowly melding it yourself until it's too late. And the act of being burned is right around the corner. It's an album about being a queer person in love during the 2000s. Whenever I hear this album, I'm reminded of who I was when I was just a teenager who didn't know anything about love and what it looked like. The world wasn't like the movies that I had seen. Kind of coming back to Kimochi Warui again, you know. The best song on this album, and the greatest song ever made by this band, Famous Prophet's Minds, is the final straw of a person's image of their partner. It exploding and him blaming both of them for all the turmoil that they were going through, showing signs of what would be explored on Monomania. There are so many motifs on here that blew me out of the water. I cannot express enough how much I love this album, but the only problem is that there are plenty of other twin fantasy deep dives. No person wants a silly rabbit talking about twin fantasy like 50 others, so I'll leave it at this. Mirror to Mirror is better than Face to Face because its message is executed with the mind of a 19-year-old, awkward, shy, and nervous about the changing life that he's about to face. It's a representation of those who don't fit anywhere. It's for the losers that even the losers don't even think are cool. I'd like to know your rankings and some reasons as well. I'm thinking of making more for Ween, Godspeed You Black Emperor, and maybe someday an Animal Collective one. But let me know in the comments what you thought, leave a like, maybe subscribe, and have a wonderful day.